Hello, and welcome to No Place Like Home with Mike and Megan Norp, where we believe the center of the universe is your home, and our home, and every other home on the planet. On this podcast, we talk about anything related to that. Homeschooling, parenting, marriage, gardening, home decorating, really anything, as long as it has to do with being home.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about how to raise geniuses.
That's right.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, everyone. We're glad you're here.
Yeah. Welcome back.
It's good to be back. Thank you. You talking to me?
Always.
So I'm not sure if there's anything worth talking about before we launch into our topic, but
Well, can you hear the birds singing outside? That's pretty, huh?
Maybe
Springtime.
so. I wonder if that's coming through.
Yeah. So
You might also hear our children chirping in the background as well.
Singing in
So
quotes.
remember, we do record this from home, so sometimes you'll hear kids in the background. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, because there's no place like home.
So how you doing, Megan? What's been going on lately?
I'm doing great. It is spring, and as you know, Mike, we've been doing a lot of projects at home and starting new things. Like we got baby chickens or chicks this
Yeah.
week.
Made some planter boxes.
Yes, Mike made some really nice planter boxes.
They're really nice.
They are nice.
They're super nice.
Yeah, we'll see if we can make anything stay alive in them.
I thought you were going to say, we'll see if they last.
No, I'm nervous about I got to really figure out how to grow things. And part of that just comes with practice year after year, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
I'd like to not learn by failure this year.
I think this year we'll make more of a go at it.
Yeah.
Because we have a combination of some options or how we're doing it. So I think
Yeah.
we got a good chance.
Yeah. But this morning on my walk, I was thinking about the Nancy Reagan quote, like, it matters less what happens in the White House and more what happens in your house.
Yeah.
And which I think is just an awesome quote. And I think right now a lot of us are thinking about what's happening not only in the White House, but on the world stage.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes I think we feel, I know I do, when I read those things, a little bit out of control or a little bit stressed or, just like anxious about the future. But
I'm sure no one else shares that sentiment.
yeah,
with you.
nobody, I'm sure.
No one else is bothered by that.
But one of the things I have found is that taking that advice of worrying less about that and more about your own home is not just I think it's not like a dig, like, dude, just take care of your own. I think it's more like, dude, you can find a lot of joy.
Dude, take care of your own in a good way.
No, I just think as I stop focusing on that so much. I mean, it's nice to be informed. It's maybe important to be informed. We could probably
That's
argue
debatable.
about that.
I don't know.
Yeah. But as I focus more on creating a joyful home and a home that where like things are run well and people are happy and healthy, I find a lot of joy and peace in my life.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and that's kind of the theme of this whole podcast, that there's really no place like home, and that your home can be your whole world. It can be your whole universe. You can set it up in a way that it really doesn't matter quite as much what's going on out there.
Yeah.
Because you have this sanctuary where people love each other, where you've got good things going on. And so for me, it's like, maybe in those things, I pray for, the people that are going through difficult things in the world. And I pray for our world leaders, our country's leaders. And I think you should be civically minded. But also, I'm thinking a lot about gardening and about making our home, cooking and baking and taking care of our own. And it brings me a lot of peace. It grounds me and it centers me. And it just quiets my mind a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you realize also you have a choice how much of that stress you sort of let into your home or into your life that wants to come in from the outside. And that just by virtue of feeling the stress or feeling the sadness of the situation doesn't necessarily solve the situation and doesn't actually change anything except making you stressed and sad.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to make a choice. You have to decide, like, okay, I'm not going to consume the media that makes me feel that way, or I'm going to control my feelings so that I can feel optimistic, I can feel hope, I can feel peace within my realm of influence.
Yeah.
Because, we all know that we only have a certain sphere of influence, and feeling a lot of stress about what's going on in the world that you have very little control over,
Well, really no control.
probably no control really, is counterproductive and doesn't really help anyone. But I think if you create a happy and positive environment for yourself, for your family, you are then having a positive effect on the world in that way.
It's hard. It can feel a little heartless to, it's almost like you feel like you're helping people when you know about the hardships they're going through and you feel sad.
Right.
And I do think there is a time and a place for that, to mourn with those that mourn,
Sure.
But I think it's also like, that's really sad. And so what I'm going to do in response to that is I'm going to see if there's anything I can do. Like maybe you can help with sending supplies or
donating or whatever.
Things along those lines, or helping refugees in your area. But I also think by then turning and loving your own
Right.
more, and maybe being more loving towards your neighbor, or just more bringing more good feelings into your present life and into your, like you said, sphere of influence. But
Right.
I keep seeing the image of like a big wave coming and diving under it in my mind. That keeps coming to my mind, that like, just let the wave roll over.
Right.
And you focus on your family and your home and setting it up like a world where things are full of joy, and you can choose the music you're listening to and the media you're consuming and the food you're consuming, and that this can be a place of peace.
Right. And that conscious choice makes a difference. And I think if more people would do that, and if a lot of us did that, then that does help the world. Like it's like this little bubble, then it expands to the next house and the next house, of peace and kind of optimism. But we each do our kind of one home at a time, and that sort of creates a bigger thing. So anyways.
Yeah. So that's what I've been thinking about. What about you?
I think kind of along those lines. I've been considering sort of how I kind of internally feel, and how I, whether I let the outside world affect how I'm feeling, and being more intentional about keeping a positive attitude and hopeful about the future, both for the world and also for, our personal lives and that sort of thing. I've been listening to a book that's about that, and so I've really been trying to do better at being positive in general, and hopefully, and when it comes down to it, it just makes me feel better.
Yeah, I think so often when things are crazy, maybe like there was a big storm in your area, like an ice storm, and it took out the power, you don't expect to feel good feelings, and you don't expect to have your normal routine, which is normal. That's how it should be until the power is restored.
Sure.
But I think sometimes you do the same thing when stressful things are happening on the national or world stage. And that's been going on for like 2 years now, or more than 2 years. And so there has to be a point where you say, you know what? I'm just going to have to let this wave roll over me and get back to living a joyful life.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
instead of trying to be a wall against it,
you
just,
or like, I can't feel good until the world goes back to normal.
Yeah. Right.
And I think a lot of us are realizing, I don't know when that's going to happen.
Right.
And I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. It seems to not be going back to quote unquote normal. And so it's just time for me to go back to normal.
Right.
Or to a peaceful life, a life where I feel hope about the future, where I feel like I have control and I can do fun, good, happy things. And that you just kind of like change a little, maybe so that, I'm not going to do that. Maybe because of gas prices, I'm not going to go on the biggest road trip of my life this summer.
Right.
But what else can I do that would be fun?
Yeah.
And bring a lot of joy. So I think, trying to just, like, I guess it's respond. I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I can pick up where you're talking, because I think a large part of it is not letting how happy or positive you feel be dependent on what's outside of you, whether it's the news or whether it's how someone treated you at the store or on the road. It's just kind of personal responsibility for my feelings and how how I react. I don't wait for anything outside of me to change so that I can then feel good, but I decide I am going to feel good regardless of how I'm treated or what I see happening. And making that choice is a more permanent and I think a place where you can grow as far as your personal sort of I don't know, you can grow personally, because if our feelings are dependent on what's outside of us, we're going to be constantly disappointed, I think,
And just
and
yanked
constantly
around
upset.
too. Yeah.
And you might have a roller coaster where you feel great because something really good happened, or you see some good news, but then you see some bad news, so you feel bad again. But to have an inner peace where it's like, I feel good, I'm going to feel positive regardless of what's happening outside of me.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it's actually really normal to have that response, and but then to say, whoa, 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 whoa.
yeah.
And I'll notice myself doing it. I'll read the news, and then I'll be like, oh my gosh, and then it's like, okay, maybe I should go and do something that brings me joy. And that doesn't mean like, because I think there's the one thing where you go and, binge on cookies or something because it's comforting.
Right.
But there's also like, why not go out and work in the garden or, turn on some happy music and do something fun, something that feels like the world is going to be fine.
Yeah.
Instead of like, oh my gosh, what does it even matter? I'm going to eat a bunch of cookies, or I'm just going to like, that's a different feeling than like.
Not the healthy way of coping.
So one of the things I remember when the world was at its most insane in a lot of ways was the summer of 2020 when we were all just like, things had literally been locked down. Like you could not go. It was closed.
Yep.
And then there was a lot of strife and that summer of 2020. And I remember going for a walk and the birds and everything was just normal out in the woods. And it was like, hey, didn't you know everything's shut down?
Birds, why are you still singing?
Yeah.
Things
it was
are horrible
actually,
right
so
now.
I guess it wasn't the summer. It was the spring before the summer even got even worse. But I was like, oh yeah, like they have no idea because their world has not changed.
Uh-huh.
They're still building their nests and the trees are still putting out their buds. And I felt like they were almost saying to me like, oh man, it's always crazy out there. We just do our own thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I'm kind of trying to do now. And both of us, I think we're trying to have projects, things that we're working on, because it signals to yourself, to your brain, to your children that like life is what you make of it. And we're moving on. Yeah. Not like, I don't care about that strife. It's like, I'm going to continue building a good life. That's the best thing I can do. It's hard to do, but it was really effective when you do it.
Well, and I think once you get in the pattern of that, it's a little bit easier. Just like anything else, you have to train your brain, I think, because you're gonna easily kind of slide back into how you were thinking before. But to be observant and to catch yourself and to get yourself back, and it might be a statement that you have that you repeat to yourself, something that kind of gets you back to that positive place.
What do you have a statement?
Well, I've had a couple that I've sort of been thinking, and it's kind of based on this book I've been listening to. I don't know.
Which is what?
It's called The Power of Intention.
And you're actually not listening to the book. You're listening to a talk based on the book, right?
Right. But if you look up the book
on
Audible, that is the book. You can buy the book, which is actually a little bit different. But anyways, Power of Intention, Wayne Dyer, really good stuff. But he has a statement that I want to feel good, or I want to feel God, like I want to be in harmony with God, essentially.
And it's not like I want to feel good, so I'm going to go eat a bunch of cookies. It's like, no, there's good out there, and I want to feel that good.
Right. I want to be connected to that good.
Yeah.
That God.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a Heavenly Father. Like that's a God that exists that I want to be kind of in frequency with. And then I think for me, I've just been generally more aware of where my thoughts are going and whether they're going to a positive place or a negative place, because I've realized that I've kind of built up some habits of thinking negatively, especially about certain things in my life. Nothing horrible. I don't want to it's not anything really bad, but you create these pathways in your brain. And so when I see myself going like, oh, wait a minute, that's a negative thought. I didn't realize how often I was thinking negatively about this thing or this person. Just kidding, not really a person.
I was like, what?
No, but mostly about things, about events. And so I've started to veer myself back to a place of thinking positively and thinking hopefully about how an outcome might happen.
Yeah.
So I'm just generally more aware, and what I'm doing also is I'm actually listening to this book now for the second time through to kind of get it drilled in there, because
Yeah, you listen to it while you're running, right?
I listen to it while I'm running. It's actually very nice to start the day that way. So anyways, that's what I've been doing to try to stay positive.
Yeah. Another thing that I do is I feel like there are so many new ideas all the time. We're kind of in this like insanely accelerated like time period where it's like, hey, have you ever thought about this? Well, drop all of that. Now you should think this.
Right.
And so you're constantly being like it's like the media, movies, whatever, music are bringing the news, are bringing ideas to you and saying, what do you think about that? Constantly, and telling you have to decide.
Sure.
What is right? What is wrong? Yeah. Choose
whatever.
a side. This is an incredibly complex issue, but it actually isn't. And you should know that how you feel about this or this country or this, statement. And, I think it's important to think through things. I totally do believe it's important to believe in things and have decided about things. But like, I feel like there's always this urgency. Like they're just like, decide.
Right.
Like you have to right now, take a stand. Silence is
Choose
violence.
a side. Yeah.
And so one of the thoughts that I have, because you'll read an article and you'll feel like it's really pushing you, even just the way it's stated, like, what do I think about that? And I'll just have to say, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But like,
do I need to?
Yeah. Like more like, I guess, because once I was in a church class and there wasn't very many people there. There was the teacher, me, and this old cowboy doctor.
Right.
Mike's heard this story before, and me and the teacher.
I love cowboy doctors.
Me and the teacher, since nobody was there, were like going into like these deep, full philosophical ideas about our faith. And we're doing this whole thing. And then at one break in the conversation, looked over at this old cowboy, and he's probably like 80, in his 80s, and he said he started chuckling and he shook his head and he's like, "Wow, you guys sure are smart." And like, I don't know about that. And like he said in a way that was incredibly charming, but a little bit like he's the smartest guy in the room. Like
you might be splitting hairs
we're getting a little ahead of
much.
ourselves here, and maybe we don't need to think that much about it. And so I don't know. I kind of been channeling that in my mind, but it's just like I don't know about that, but I do know this.
Yeah.
I do know that that loving your family is good. I do know that like these ideas are good, and I'm sure we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's hard to describe, and it might not be helpful for anybody but me, but it's kind of that it's letting myself not decide at this minute and let it go a little bit.
Right.
And,
don't overthink it or get too caught up in it.
Yeah. The urgency of it.
Sure.
Anyways, we that's a little bit of a.
Well, I think there's a way to segue into our actual topic for the day, because I was thinking about this. This is also part of this book I've been listening to, because we want to talk about raising geniuses. And I think that has to start from a point kind of higher level where our sort of we see ourselves and we see everyone around us as people with value and who are geniuses in their own way or are amazing in their own way. And that if someone else is good at something or is skilled at something or whatever, it doesn't take away from me, and it doesn't mean that I'm stupid or unskilled. It just means that they're different than me.
Yeah. So the topic today, raising geniuses.
Sorry, I might be jumping in too soon.
Is a little bit of like, I absolutely know that like it sounds a little prickish. Like my children are geniuses, and like it's a contest or something. Like, and I am going to raise geniuses, and like we've got some secret formula to make your children into geniuses. They have to read for 8 hours a day or whatever.
The world.
Yeah. But it's actually, and I know that, and I kind of think that's, I think that's kind of fun. And I know that at first you might be like, feel pressure or like, oh no, my kids have to be geniuses. And you're right. I should help them be geniuses. And it's actually what Mike's saying is that we really do believe that every person is a genius.
Yeah. I think that's the point, is that we're not talking about making someone better than someone else, but recognizing the genius that's in someone and helping to foster the growth in that.
Yeah.
And so I think you first have to accept that about yourself as a parent,
Yeah.
that you also are a genius.
And we don't mean that like everybody's good at something or has some things they're good at. Like we legit believe that every person is a genius in their own way.
Right.
Like has a set of gifts that come together in a particular way that make them really a genius.
Right.
And we mean a genius in the way of like an inch wide and a mile deep. You guys ever heard that statement where it's like you can either be a mile wide
And
and an inch deep, or you can be an inch wide and a mile deep? I think everybody has the potential to be an inch wide and a mile deep. And I think if everybody on the planet did that, for one thing, everybody is we will have so much diversity of thought and talent and aptitude. But what an exciting world to live in.
Right.
Where everybody is so specialized.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that you kind of figure out what the thing is that you're good at or that you're a genius at, and you really expand on that. You go deep.
Yeah.
You don't have to be good at everything.
Yeah. In fact, I think our modern society has made it very difficult to understand this idea. Industrialization. Andrew and I talk about this idea a lot, that people used to live in villages, really, historically.
Right.
If you go back, most people lived in smaller groups, and they usually are about groups of 150 people.
Okay.
And something that happens when you're a group of 150 people is it's easier to rely on the individual, like the genius of individuals.
Right.
Because you've got the shoemaker.
Yeah, you know the role you play.
The tailor and the blacksmith. And, you knew that you were different and that you were special, and the community needed it.
Right.
But it is a little bit harder when now nobody goes to the shoemaker. Everybody just goes to like the shoe warehouse.
The Foot Locker.
Yeah, and gets the shoes there, and everybody, and so it's almost like this, and then you go to school, if you go to public school, and everybody is treated like they're the exact same thing.
You're all expected to study the same thing and to do
and be
well.
good at the same things.
For the most part, you might have a few choices as you get up in high school, but for the most part, there isn't much
And then
chance.
It's like everybody's supposed to get an A, but it's like this crazy system where like, but they know everybody can't. And so like built into it is to tell some people that they're failures.
Right. Yeah. There's winners and losers.
That system is built that way. And so then parents feel super stressed because their kids just either aren't learning to read as fast as other kids, or they hate math, or they're not good at it, or whatever. And so then you're putting them into tutoring, or you're trying all these things, or you're, trying to coerce them to do more studying so they can stay with their peers.
Right.
But the thing is, like, we think that whole system is bonkers.
Right.
Because we believe in the shoemaker and the tailor and the blacksmith idea that everybody is something totally different.
Right.
And how crazy would it be as a gardener to plant a bunch of different plants in your garden and expect them all to grow tomatoes?
Sure, to be tomatoes as they grow.
Yeah, what is this green thing that you're growing? This isn't a tomato, or this is the worst tomato I've ever seen. It's like, well, I'm not a tomato plant. or even to say, I gave you the same nutrients as a tomato plant. I did everything that I did for my tomato plants, but you're not doing it. And it's like, well, it's because I'm a potato plant. Like I'm a totally different thing, and I require different nutrients. And there's just no way that public schools can do that.
It's very difficult. And I think I guess that's our first sort of our point is that
our first premise is
the
that
public school system, or compulsory school as we call it, because there's private schools as well, but have a difficult time helping kids identify genius and kind of focus on that. In fact, it's impossible just because of the system, how it operates.
I mean,
excuse me.
Yeah, the foundational ideas of them are completely at odds with that.
Right.
And so you can foster that at home. Like, oh, well, but then what's the point, right? Because
going to school?
Yeah, because you're constantly being given the message that you aren't measuring up.
Right.
Or that you're dumb.
Right.
Or not gifted is enough, right? Those are the smart kids, or those are the gifted kids, or the accelerated program, or whatever it is.
Right. The GT, gifted and talented.
Yeah.
When we were kids,
and then there's the rest of you.
Yeah, I know. All those kids get on the bus and go somewhere else. I don't know what they did.
Because you weren't gifted or talented,
for an hour or two. I know. So they would leave, then come back, and we'd be like, oh, okay, they're the special kids, and I'm not.
Yeah.
So
it's just built into the system. But then there's an alternative way of doing it.
Uh-huh.
And I think no organization does it better than the family.
Right.
Because you have small groups.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher, the administrators love each of the children in this classroom more than probably life itself.
Right.
I've spent countless hours with each student and have an understanding and appreciation for them that is unrivaled.
Yeah.
And can give them lots of attention. And also there's a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
We have, in a home school, if you're thinking as a school, what can rival that? What, to say like, well, this child is going to do this and this one's going to do this different thing. Or because I know that's not their genius, I'm not going to worry about how this child is doing in it.
Right. And
even if we're all doing the same
discipline
thing
or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I guess for us, once you realize that everybody is a genius, you realize that nothing can help foster genius better than a family.
Right.
And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's talk first about how everybody's a genius and how really the first step is accepting that you are.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we didn't always believe that about ourselves. We went to public school. We were mediocre students, if at best.
Good enough to get into college, or at least college I wanted to go to. But
how did we find out, I guess, what our genius was?
I don't know. I don't want to go too much into our history. I can't remember all the steps we took, but essentially we realized like, okay, I am different. I am myself, and the things I'm good at or that I excel at, I don't have to compare myself to others. I can just be me, and then I'm allowed to kind of focus on those things.
Well, I think what was instrumental in doing that was we took some personality tests.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know, again, I don't know how much detail I want to get into, but for me especially, it took me a couple tries to figure out, because even in taking the personality test, I was actually like trying to be someone else as I was taking the test. I'm answering it in a way that I think that I should be, or the type of person I want to be, or like it was this weird
if you were
sort of
going to be a
mental
good
game.
person, you would answer like this.
Right. I wasn't really answering completely honestly, because you kind of think like, well, that's not very smart or cool. I should answer it this way. Anyway, so I think accepting like, okay, I'm going to answer this the way that I am, and accept that no matter how these things turn out, this test, I'm worth something, or I have value. And that took a little while.
It's worth talking about, because it was in accepting ourselves and in that journey that then you realize that about your own children.
That's true. Yeah.
In school, always got good grades on tests, but I never did my homework, and my desk was always a total disaster, and I was always losing things, and I was always getting bad marks for talking too much. Surprise, surprise. But I was very aware that I was different, that I could not be the thing. I tried, and every 6 week, school whatever time period, I'd be like, okay, this time I'm going to be a totally different person. I'm going to do all of my homework. And I'd get a week and a half in and be like, oh my gosh, I'm already behind. I already got a 0 or whatever. And it was this shame cycle I was in that lasted even until I was a new mom.
Yeah.
And so for me, the personality test was a little easier. The one we took was the Myers-Briggs. Mm-hmm. But there's other ones out there. I think you want one. I think the main qualification for a good personality test is it has more than 4 personality types.
Right.
In fact, the more, and we'll talk about some of it, but so it was easier for me to answer. But like you were saying for yourself, you had spent all of your life believing that there was a type of person that was good.
Sure.
And maybe lots of types that were bad, which is what school reinforced.
Yeah. And
definitely. So you would just quiet all of the parts of you that you felt were, or you would try to ignore them as much as possible, and then try to convince yourself, yes, I'm that thing. And it worked okay for you. That didn't work for me, but it worked well enough for you.
I could play the game well enough to get by. And I didn't stick out in a big way as far as you definitely had a higher profile when it comes your teachers noticing and not being able to kind of navigate.
Yeah, kind of more extreme. And so first time you took the personality test, you got the weirdest,
it came back with a description that didn't fit.
Yeah, and then the second time you took it was once again, it was like the personality type of your brother. or
Yeah.
your older brothers. And then the third time you took it, I helped you. Now that sounds a little controlling, but I was just watching. I'd be like, babe, you're not like that at all. You're more like this. And you would be like, you realized as we were doing that. And when you got that result, it was literally earth shattering, not literally, because that would be terrifying.
The earth would actually shatter.
But it was a big deal. Yeah. It was a big deal. You changed courses with your career.
Uh-huh.
You started to trust yourself, and you divorced yourself from the idea of that you were a crappier version of your brothers.
Certain, yeah.
That you just realized, actually, I'm not them at all. I'm a totally different thing. And
and there's nothing bad to say about my brothers. I was just I was the youngest.
Of course, that's not, because the point is they're great at what they are, but you're just not them.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that you did help me with that, because I was not very well in touch with who I was. And so I think for people out there who may be trying to work on that, if you have someone that knows you well and is a fan of you.
Yes, that's a big part of it.
Okay. Then I don't think it's a bad thing to have them involved in that process of trying to figure that out.
Like, would you say that I am like this or like this?
Right. It can be helpful because an outside observer can actually see things that you're missing.
Yeah. And so what was also great about the test, we took it with a book by Kiersey Institute or something, and it kind of talked about what your personality type did for the world.
Uh-huh.
And suddenly realizing I'm important. Like people, the world needs people exactly like me.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what we're talking about when we say genius.
Right.
The world needs somebody with your unique set of strengths and viewpoints and ways of doing things. And so the Myers-Briggs is definitely great. It gives you 16 personality types with like some subtypes. But later on, we took the Gallup Strengthsfinder test.
Yep.
And Strengthsfinder 2.0 is the book. And that has literally like billions of combinations.
Uh-huh.
So it feels like it really can dial into your very specific genius. And the way that it does that is it has 34 strengths and it ranks them.
Yeah.
So you get your top 5, or you can get all 34, which I think is important. But the way that those top 5 or top 10 combine make you incredibly unique.
Right.
And so, for instance, I'm going to just talk about 2 of mine in my top 5. One is connectedness and one is futuristic. And connectedness is seeing how things connect, how ideas connect, and what ideas will lead to what consequences.
Right.
And then futuristic is being able to see down the road a little bit, or always being future oriented, right?
Uh-huh.
And so somebody might have futuristic but not have connectedness, and vice versa.
Yep.
But when you put those 2 together, as well as my other strengths, I become someone who's constantly looking at where we're at and understanding where we are going.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I can take in input is another one. I can take in the information, see where we're at and where it will take us. And so that when those combine, you become a very specific thing. Now, once again, this is a man-made test.
Sure.
That somebody's just kind of putting some things together to help you understand yourself better. There's way more to you than any test could ever just like diagnose.
Yeah.
But it does help you start to see a little bit into, I just believe that maybe you're different, but also super important.
Right.
And I don't mean super important to the whole world, like you're going to be like Captain Marvel and you have to save the world with your talents, but to your world, to your family, to your friends, to your church community, to your town, that sort of thing. But most importantly, to your family, I think.
Right.
That you have a very specific set of gifts and talents that if you magnify them, you will be a genius at them. Yeah. And a gift to people around you.
Right. And also, again, starting with at the very base level and I'll get a little, I don't want to say religious here, but I think as a child of God, because we believe we are all children of a Heavenly Father, that gives you a value that regardless of a personality test or whatever, that's where there's true meaning, and we all have that. And so if we start there and then we kind of figure out where our strengths are. It just helps us to, I think, feel better about who we are. And then also it helps us recognize others are that way too, and our children as an extension of that.
Yeah, as soon as you start to see that you are, and I do think it's hard to do this without starting with yourself.
Right.
Then you can turn to your children, and they'll be similar to you in some ways, because they might be biologically related to you, but also because they're growing up in your home and you're having influence on them. But you'll start to see what they're good at. And you'll also stop trying to make them be good at things they have no business being good at, that they're not made to do.
Yeah, they're just not going to get there.
Because that's not what they're for. And I do believe that we are all given gifts and strengths and genius to serve those around us.
Right.
But I mean, like this week, I was reading the 5th chapter of the book Andrew is writing right now, and he's kind of releasing it a chapter at a time. And the 5th chapter, I mean, each chapter I've read is better and better. This one was just incredibly beautiful. And I was just moved. I was in awe of his talent that he's already developed. And just almost like just glad to know him and to be a part of this process and to watch his genius unfold. But I can also know exactly when it's Andrew's dishes night. Yeah. Because the kitchen is just not that clean.
Yeah.
And
it's definitely not his strength.
Yeah. And you know, when he did go to public school, that he the teacher was kind of hard on him and teased him about how he operated.
Right.
And so we came in one day, I was like helping out with a project, and she's like, we have 2 trash cans. We have like one over here for everybody. And then we have one under Andrew's desk for Andrew, because he's such a pig or something like that. You know, he's such a mess. I don't know if
she said pig, but she did.
Like he said something like it's a pigsty or something like that. And she was like kind of laughing it off. But I was quite alarmed by this because it was reinforcing what I already knew. And that school puts you into these categories of failure, really, because you're not like everybody else. And so when it was like, okay, we're definitely coming back. We were homeschooling. We took a year off, and that was when he was in the 3rd grade. And we brought him back home so that we could focus on what he is instead of what he isn't. Yeah. And public school seems to, if you're not the thing, which so few are, you're spending so much time focusing on what you're not. Yeah. And the thing we believe is that you'll never be great at those things anyways, because you were never meant to. So if we spend all of our time saying, Andrew, you don't get to write until this kitchen is immaculate. Right. He's never going to be able to get it as immaculate as others might. And then he never gets to be the genius. Right. It's a waste of his resources, really. Yeah. Like you get in there and write. Like, you know what? We do still require him to do the dishes. But we also we recognize that he's never going to be really great at understanding how to get that kitchen as clean, because he doesn't, his gifts lie in the abstract, and cleaning kitchens is not abstract. It's very concrete and it's very linear. And you can't be as imaginative and gifted in writing as he is, at least in the way that he is, and be concrete and linear at the same time. Right. And I think we make the mistake of expecting everyone to be good at everything all the time. And so but there's no way, you can't get one without, or if you have one, you're most likely not going to have the other. It's just not going to happen. So I think it's worth going through, because your children can't necessarily take a personality test, right? That's more of as an adult. So how we kind of recognize sort of what our children are good at and helping guide them along, but also we have to, but not pigeonholing them into one thing where it's like, well, you liked this before, why don't you like it now? Because I think we can do that too. And Megan and I, we oftentimes use this kind of gardening metaphor in our minds, because I think it's helpful. Because you, as the parent, are the gardener. Your children are the plants or the seeds, and your job is just to help nurture this plant along and help it grow. And the only issue is that when we're given this handful of seeds, we don't actually know what they are. We have no idea what the seeds are. They don't come in a packet that says these are tomatoes or this is corn. So we plant the seeds, but then we have to start watching and being observant for what's growing. Yeah. So one plant might be looking great and the plant next to it might be kind of withering, and you realize, oh, this plant needs more water. Right. instead of, hey, why aren't you doing as well as the plant next to you?
Yeah.
You've gotten, it's like, okay, you actually need more water, or,
Right.
oh, the leaves are turning yellow on this one. So, okay, it obviously needs more of this nutrient than this other plant does.
Right. So it's about it's being observant to what's going on, and like we've talked about this before. It would be ridiculous for a gardener to be yelling at his plants who aren't kind of performing the way, because any gardener knows, like, okay, something is happening here, and it's not the plant's fault. I just need to maybe change the environment or adjust. So you start to watch and be observant, and you start to see what fruit or vegetable is starting to bear out. And then you do what you can to nurture as they do this, and also give it room to grow. So at first I thought this was a corn stalk, but wait a minute, it's actually some beans. So we accept that. We say, okay, wait a minute, I was wrong on that. So you're kind of there for that process, and then you're willing to do whatever you can to nurture. Now the plant has to grow itself. You can't force it to grow.
But plants do grow.
They do grow, and just like children do. And
if the environment is right, they grow.
Right, and because we don't force our kids to do things. They do have to do chores, but we don't. We're not making them grow. We're not like, I don't know how to explain it, but
I mean, we've talked. I don't know if we've talked about it on here before, because we've talked to each other so many times and to others, but we do believe in learning discipline, and we teach our children discipline through chores.
Right.
Like they learn to do hard things through chores.
We also teach them discipline through what's acceptable as far as how you treat others. Yeah. And how you treat your parents and that sort of thing. And respect in those ways. Those things are expected.
But we don't force them to learn things they're not interested in learning. And right. So, but everybody kind of feels like, well, how will they ever learn to do hard things at work or in their life? And it's like, they learn that through their chores.
Right.
We want learning and that exploration process to be a joy.
Right.
So we let that be child-led.
Yeah, we do.
We require them to be doing something and to be spending their time engaged in something, worthy. Or I mean, what's the word? But
productive.
Productive. But we don't decide what that's going to be, and we don't make them do the same thing as everybody else. Now, you might wonder, what are some of those clues that would tell me what my child is good at?
Right. Where their genius sort of lies or strengths.
I think, there are some ways which you can tell, but I find that one of the easiest ways for parents new to this idea to find is you probably already know what they're not good at. And that's a really good clue.
Yeah, that's true.
I hear all the time, my daughter hates math. What am I supposed to do? And I think what they're saying is, my daughter hates math, and because she's not very good at it. Mm-hmm. How do I make her good at math and love it? Right. And it's like, you don't.
Right.
You just don't. Mm-hmm. But what it tells you is that she might be less. I mean, there's different types of math, right? Uh-huh. It might mean that she's a little bit more of an abstract thinker. Uh-huh. It might mean that she likes art more than she likes math, and that's where her gifts and her genius is. Mm-hmm. And so I think the reason we're aware of what our kids are good at, especially if they're in school, is because we're so trained to look at where we're failing.
Sure.
And think in order to get ahead, we have to focus on our failures.
In order to improve it, to strengthen it, to get the grades they need.
Yeah. And that's another part of Strengthsfinder, which we really appreciated, is you get these 34 strengths, and then it ranks them from top to bottom, and talks about how often in our life we are very aware of what our bottom strengths are. Mm-hmm. And we call them our weaknesses, but they don't. They say, no, these are just, you can still do these things that are on the bottom of your strengths. They just are very draining for you. And you're going to be less productive doing those things. Yeah. We all think, well, I'm really bad at discipline.
Like having discipline.
And like following a schedule.
Okay.
And so, because I kind of do things randomly or sporadically or impulsively. And so I need to get better at discipline. This is absolutely from my life.
Right.
And definitely so year after year or 6 week after 6 week in school, it's like, this time it's going to be different. I am going to be disciplined. I'm going to make a schedule, and I could make a beautiful schedule. I've made so many over the years.
You're good at that. That's true.
Get out a poster and get out colored markers and make a beautiful schedule. And I could never do it. And Strengthsfinder would tell you, you're never, ever going to be good at following that schedule. It is like a prison to you.
Yeah.
It is. And so if you focus on that, you're focusing on something that you can get slightly better at. Why don't you instead go focus on the things that you are good at? And those you can exponential growth.
Right.
Because that's what you're made to do. And then the things that maybe you can either, that are at the bottom, like discipline, you can either set up systems where they take care of themselves. You can get some help. Maybe you get a personal assistant or something, whatever. For me, discipline didn't matter as much once I learned how to play within the confines of my own brain, how it worked, how I like to get things done. And then I got things done.
Yeah.
But if I was always trying to do them in the way of I always got it down to 15-minute increments. And it's, oh my gosh, which is a living hell for me. Then I got nothing done and avoided my day completely. But so that's kind of the idea, is that we assume that when our kids aren't good at math, then we need to do more math. But it actually means they're probably they're not going to be a mathematician. So what are they?
Right.
You can cross that off the list.
Sure.
Right. And also we talked about pigeonholing.
Right.
But very few of our kids are going to be mathematicians anyways.
Right.
But math is, you got to look at these subjects a little bit more, like zoom out.
Yep.
Math is something that often requires linear thinking, concrete thinking. Not always, but certain maths are, and so when you're looking at something they're bad at, don't look at it as oh, now they won't be a mathematician, but maybe they're not quite as a linear a thinker.
Right. Or
maybe they don't like to sit still so much and just do the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
But some people love to. And thank goodness, I heard a story once where somebody was talking, this is very vague.
Wow.
But somebody was talking to a church leader, I think, and they said that they were kind of praying about what they should study in college. And they were afraid that maybe they had chosen something, but they were afraid that maybe they should be like an accountant because it made really good money or something. And the person said, well, are you even good at accounting? It's well, no. It's then no, you shouldn't be an accountant. And it's just what are you good at? And because that's going to clue you into what you're a genius at.
Right.
And you might be I don't know what I'm good at. It's well, that's an exciting thing to explore.
Yeah. You can figure that out.
Yeah. And then it's an exciting thing to explore next to your children. As you model that for them, they will maybe let go a little bit of their anxiety about what they aren't. And as they hear you and watch you accept yourself and work on your genius, they'll do the same.
Yeah.
We found that to be true.
Well, and I think part of that is you have to let go of the whole model of this path, this very specific path of you go up through your grades, high school to university or college to career. Because by letting your child and yourself be good at what you're good at, college may not be a part of the equation for that person. And that's okay if it's not, because not all happiness goes through college.
Well, it's also just you're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Because when college is the thing,
that's not the point.
Then it pulls in all the paths and it has to be on this one. When it's we don't even need to think about that yet. Don't even, because let's just be on the path at where we're at. Because we took college off the table and now Elijah's in college.
Right.
Daniel's going to go to culinary school. Esther's in hair school but has thought about maybe going to college afterwards. And Andrew now is thinking of going to college.
And we don't want any of them to go to college.
I know, it's
what are they doing?
Hey, we said you didn't need to go to college. What are you doing? No, it's just that when you think about college, it's all you can think about is getting into college.
Yeah.
It's just take that off the table for right now.
Well,
you're getting ahead of yourself. Let's just think about supporting them in their genius. And that might be, it's getting cardboard for your 7-year-old who's always cutting things up. It's teaching them how to use the glue gun so that they can use it on their own.
Right.
It's getting them the materials to support the thing that they're interested in, but it's also letting them stop being interested in things.
Yeah.
And helping them,
so
often we when they're 7 and they like to play soccer, it's like, well, you are a soccer player forever.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't
never
quit.
this.
And it's like, no, they got what they needed from it.
Uh-huh.
Now let's find something that's even better for them. And
Right.
it's so often we make our kids stay at something because we're afraid if we don't, then they'll never learn discipline.
Yeah.
But teach them discipline through chores. Teach them discipline through self-care and things along those lines. Let them explore lots of ideas while they're under your roof. That's the point. They don't have to earn a living right now. They'll figure that out later. Let them explore right now and try out lots of things.
Right. And I think relax about this whole college idea, because what we've learned is that there's a million ways to get into college.
Yes.
We all think that there's this one path, and it's good grades, it's a good ACT score, and it's honors classes.
Yeah.
Or sports, like that's it.
Oh, and
if
belonging
you
to these clubs.
If you don't do all those things, you're not going to get into college, and then you're going to be homeless.
Yes.
Really, like people have that fear.
Yeah.
It's like, no, there are a million ways to get into college. There's a million different colleges out there. There's community colleges. There's so many options to get into school that if that's something that becomes something that you want to do, even if you didn't ever have an ACT and you have 0 grades to show, you can still get into college.
Yeah.
Because we've had children who do it.
Yeah.
So that doesn't need to be a huge stressor for you as a parent, because that stress is going to make you force your child to do things that may not actually be good for them.
Yeah, we all know we've all had those moments where we're terrified that we're failing as a parent. And so our response is to go harder on our kids.
Right. We get scared, so we get angry, and we clamp down and say, you are going to sit here.
You get upstairs and read that book.
And you're going to write that essay.
Yeah.
But that really is counterproductive as far as what's actually good for your child and helping them to achieve. There are some kids that are naturally good at school, and they do well with those things without much
Well, because they
coercion.
happen to be the tomato plant.
And that's fine. However, not everyone's that way. And that's the point. Watch your children, observe what they are, and try to help them. Because one thing that a little kind of metaphor that you used in the past is the whisk who's trying to be a spatula sort of thing.
Yeah.
A whisk cannot flip pancakes.
It can bend itself as flat as it wants, but it will never be very
able
good
to
at
flip
that.
a pancake because it's not meant for that.
Yeah.
And so recognize that in yourself and recognize it in your children and give them the latitude to kind of explore where they are.
Yeah.
And also, I will say this, what's interesting is as I watch our kids kind of grow and learn on their own, they learn some of these other disciplines just as kind of a consequence of kind of exploring what they're interested in.
Before we move forward, I want to say that your children, like your plants in your garden, are not going to produce for a while, produce fruit.
Oh, fruit, right.
And so your children are geniuses. You'll get some clues early on as to some of those things, but we really don't expect the genius to come out until their teen years.
Right.
It seems like they start to around 12 or 13 start to narrow down or zero in on
kind of what they're interested in, or
and so we
you
see
start to see progress, as it were.
So our job before then is to encourage exploration, to expose them to ideas and experiences. That's part of why we travel.
Right.
It's why we have lots of books in our home. It's why we have lots of conversations in our home. And it's why we work hard to provide materials and freedom so that during those ages. It's like crazy to ask a kid who just showed up, like, what are you good at? They're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. They have to try out a lot of things. Some find it sooner.
Right.
I mean, and some find it later. But really don't try to push them too hard. You're encouraging them and excited about the things they're doing, but not so much that you're defining who they are. So then they just think, oh, because they're really good at reading you, I guess this is what I'm good at. But eventually will feel pigeonholed into that thing.
Right.
Let them play around. Let them explore some ideas. Now, what that means is your in-laws, I always say in-laws, but your parents, your extended family members might think your kids aren't doing anything.
Or not progressing.
Your kids might even feel that because, Mike, you were at a thing last night and somebody asked you about his homeschooling, right?
Yeah, that's about it. What his favorite subject was. And he kind of said, I don't know. I didn't want to say it. Again, a 9-year-old isn't always real accurate with what he's actually doing. But he said, I'm just on screens and listening to books all day. Which that's not true.
That's not true at all. He's not
However,
allowed to be on screens all day. But
he is on screens for some of the day, and he does listen to books for some of the day.
well, and it's funny because, it's just a classic question adults ask kids to be nice.
Yeah.
What's your favorite subject? And in school, there's like 5 to 7 subjects.
Uh-huh.
And Jude doesn't know how to answer this question as a homeschooler. He could have talked about the subjects he watches videos on because he's required to, if he's on a screen that's only certain times of day and they have to be watching educational things or seeing something of value on there. He could have shared one of those things, but he had no idea. And it was funny, right? It doesn't look like what we're so used to. We're so used to forcing kids to sit at these desks and to doing the 5 to 7 subjects, just like everybody else at the same pace. It also means that your kids might learn to read later than other people. They might learn to read younger. Boy, those are the best.
Yeah.
Gets everybody off your back. But it's trusting that they'll learn how to read and at different paces. And they do. It's scary because we're first generation homeschoolers. So we know that it's scary. Yeah, but the pressure you put on them isn't helpful. But immersing them in books and in the written language is just like talking to your toddler all the time. They'll learn. Yeah. And they do. They really do. And so I think that unschooling is the best blanket term to be used to describe what we do, but we don't think it's perfect. We haven't come up with a name yet. Maybe someday we will.
Yeah, I don't know. We've thought about a few different things, but
so we feel like if you really want to help your children, you want to raise a genius first.
And again, genius is not like they're performing at Carnegie Hall when they're 13 sort of thing.
Well, unless they're a musical genius.
Maybe they are. However, to me, it's just the genius is defined by whatever they're kind of uniquely gifted at or interested in. If you can help them see that and discover it by the time they're early adulthood, then you have made a genius. I mean, you have helped them become that.
Yeah.
Because,
and we're happy to report that it works. That we have these young adult children who are doing really interesting things, and we have no doubt we'll be able to support themselves because they already can. But that they enjoy what they're doing.
Right.
They have confidence because they know what they're good at and who they are.
Yeah.
And they aren't just tossed around by the pressures of, the communities that they're in because they know who they are.
Right.
And so when they interact with other people, they're like, oh, well, that's not me.
Right.
That's not how I work or what I do or what I think. And so,
not to mention the fact that they've been able to avoid so many of the potholes and pitfalls that come with attending public school, which is a whole other topic.
On that,
There's so much junk that
but the biggest junk
comes home from
is that they're not a genius.
Right.
That they are a broken version of an A student.
Right.
A grade A student. Even if they are the A student, they know they have to keep being that in order to have value. So that's
is a whole it's a whole system that bases your worth on comparing yourself to other people, which is so unhealthy and unhelpful for anyone.
We all know that.
That goes back to our earlier conversation. Like your value has to be found somewhere else other than how you compare to others or whether you're better or worse than other people is really what it comes down to.
So the first thing, like we just said, discover where your genius is. This won't be overnight, but do it in front of your kids. Explore ideas. And then start pointing out things that they're good at. Like you're really good at understanding stories. You just seem to understand what the characters are going to do next. Or you're amazing at art, or you're really good at fixing things or whatever. And you're just helping them see little things that they're good at. Second, you're not going to pigeonhole them into things. Like Elijah was really good at fixing our fences. He was very mechanical. But
Back when we had a little farm and whatever.
But we didn't make him become a mechanic. He could have become a mechanic, but it turns out he likes doing things with photography and videography, but he's doing similar sorts of processes. He likes to
artistic side of things.
Yeah, and he likes to engineer things, but maybe in a more artistic sense. Third is you're giving them the space to explore and experience lots and lots of different things. Because there are endless types of geniuses. There are endless ways that experiences that they can have and explore in order to figure themselves out.
Right.
I don't want you to feel like you need to be in a frenzy, like, oh, more experiences, but
Well, they will do a lot of this on their own. That's the
Yeah.
point. Like, you don't have to be constantly driving around to all these museums and being the one that does everything.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the beauty of this system is that they become self-reliant in that way.
Mm-hmm.
They seek things out, but making sure that
You're
there's
nourishing that
resources
soil.
available to them. And every once in a while, you are going to drive to a museum and you are going to go see something. I took Asher out to a little blacksmith class, a few months ago. So you will do things, but the great thing is that the kids do a lot of it on their own.
And then when you do those things, you're not going to force them to experience it in the way that you think they should experience it.
Right.
Like, I'm going to take you to a science museum and you should have this experience there.
Right.
You're going to watch. You're going to observe and notice they really enjoyed this exhibit or they really they really lit up during this experience at the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to take little mental notes and you're going to start to form a picture with these clues of how other experiences you could give them or other things that might, really excite them. But I think it's so important, when we told somebody that we traveled with our kids, they said, when you go to these places, I'm sure you make them write essays afterwards. Right. And we were like, what? No, no. Then they'd never want to go to anything ever again. We just go to a museum with no preconceived notions and we wander around. And if we're bored, we don't feel like we're dumb.
Right.
And if we're having a good time, we stay longer. And it's very relaxed. And so everybody feels safe to actually either be interested or not.
Right.
And
because I think if your kids realize, like, as soon as I show interest in something, mom makes me write a paper on that thing, they're going to stop showing interest in anything.
Unless they happen to be somebody whose genius is in writing essays.
Sure.
And
they'll
they
do it
want
on their
to
own.
write. Yes, they will. They'll have little journals that they write in and you'll encourage them. You'll buy them more journals and you'll give them more chances to write about things. You might get them, a book about writing, or as they get older, if they're interested, you'll get them a course online about writing. And you trust that it'll all work out. I'm going to use Andrew as an example one more time before we end. Andrew knew he wanted to be a writer since he was 9, I think. He decided he wanted to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if that was going to stick, but here he is, 17. I think it's sticking. He was so good at stories and so very bad at grammar and spelling. Yeah. So bad.
I remember his early stories.
Oh my gosh, his first book.
To read.
Yeah, it was so painful. And he really thought he was going to get it published. And it was painful for him when you were pointing out all the grammar mistakes in it. But something I learned through that process is, 1, be honest.
Yeah.
It's not doing your child any favors if they're trying to become great at something and you tell them it's great before it is. And 2, trust that if you give them the resources and they want to do it, they will get better. Andrew was just telling me yesterday that he uses Grammarly as part of what he does for his grammar. He's taken grammar courses. He's read grammar books as he's tried to improve his grammar. And he's not perfect because he's 17, but he's light years ahead where he used to be on his Grammarly score.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't have to sit down and force him to do that. I think it's a point.
But I also did say this. I was very honest, I think. And I said, your story's really good. I focused on his genius, but it's harder to read because of your grammar.
Right.
And you're going to have to figure that out if you want to be able to communicate effectively in your books. And so that's a specific child discovering their genius and some of the things that I've learned. I was so worried that he would never be able to learn grammar. But he's 17 and he's already almost there. When I read his stories now, there's a few things here and there that I think he needs to improve on. I don't think there's a writer in the world who doesn't need an editor.
No, everybody needs an editor.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And so I think you can also relax.
Yeah.
You think that your child at 11 is going to be your child at 21, and they're just not. They're just not. They grow so much. And if you will support them in the things that they're good at and give them the tools and resources to be better at the things they're good at, rather than spending all of their time at the things they're not good at.
Yeah.
If you'll trust that those things will kind of work themselves out as they become the genius that they were created to become, it is such a gratifying process. It feels like a true privilege to be a mom to these 9 kids and watch each and every one of them explore and grow in their genius. It is, nothing is better. No job in the world is better than that sort of human development, than that sort of exciting, wondrous process. It's the best.
That is great. And it's awesome to watch them work hard at something, and you didn't have to crack a whip. You didn't have to force them to really work hard on this project or this thing. They're just doing it because they want to and they like it.
Yeah, I mean, there's times when our kids are stuck in a rut, and we have to kind of encourage them to go for a walk and get out and try to, and just because everybody gets stuck in a rut, and that's part of the educational process is we teach them how to get out of a rut.
Yeah, your job is to be watching and observing and jumping in where you can, but it's not to be pushing and prodding and making and forcing,
threatening,
or like we've talked about with the snowplow parenting thing, like trying to get all the obstacles out of their way so they don't have to like experience any obstacles, because they're going to.
Yeah.
Just like Andrew has with his writing, he's had to overcome a lot of that, and we haven't removed those things for him.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of being by their side. I don't know what kind of parenting you call this, but it's being there when you need to be, but for the most part, stepping back.
Yeah.
And letting them do it, because also it gives them confidence that they can accomplish things. It gives them confidence in themselves to continue to do that for the rest of their life. Because in the end, what we're all hoping for is happy, productive adults who are confident in what they're doing and enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah. And so far, this really seems like the way to do it.
Yeah, it's great. And I think people think that if I bring my kids home, as far as to homeschool, it's going to be more work for me. But I can assure you it's actually less work in the end.
Work.
Because you're not constantly fighting against all the garbage that's coming home from school with your kids. And I'm not just talking about physical garbage of handouts and all that stuff. I mean, that is garbage. But the mental garbage, emotional garbage, social garbage,
spiritual garbage,
all that stuff that comes home with them.
That we just take for granted that that's just how it is. Parenting teenagers or parenting kids.
Doesn't have to be that way.
No, and it isn't that way.
Your life will be so much easier if you can keep them home. It really will be, and let them do their thing. It's a beautiful system that can work on its own for the most part. So,
and I want to close and reiterate one more time that you are a genius. You may not know it yet, but that's exciting.
Yeah,
you get to figure it out, and no matter what. You could say, but my child, and I say, I know they're a genius. I know they're a genius. If you don't know what type yet, maybe it's because nobody's ever been a genius like they have.
Right.
Maybe you've got somebody who's really going to do interesting, curious things.
Right.
So stay curious, stay optimistic, and wonder about what amazing genius your child is going to bring to the world. Because I know they will. If we can just nourish the soil that they're planted in and just watch them grow.
And if you can see them as a genius, that will change how you act toward them.
Yeah.
If that is a fact in your brain,
you just don't know what kind yet.
Then you don't know what kind yet. The actions that you take and the way that you treat them will let them know that. And it's this idea of if you change the way you see things, the things you look at change, that they will feel that from you, and they will act accordingly, and you will act accordingly. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They'll get there and you'll get there, as if that's your perspective.
Yeah.
So
exciting, guys.
Yeah, there's so much potential in you and your child or children that it can be really exciting.
And there's no greater privilege in the world than to watch them develop into the thing that they were created to be.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks for coming along.
Yeah, thanks for being with us, everybody, and appreciate your time. If you'd like to leave us a review on our podcast wherever you're listening to it, and come back next time for more discussion about home and everything that has to do with it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
That's it. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.